the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a public function which is going to allow us to call set particle data from outside of our decal pool, and it's also going to call the next function that we're going to write, display particles. So we're going to add a public function that returns void called particle hit, and this is going to take, again, a particle collision event called particle collision event and a gradient called color gradient. So basically the same as set particle data. And then we are going to call set particle data and pass in the particle collision event and the color gradient, right? So we're going to, from outside the class, we're going to, in this case, from our particle launcher, we're going to pass in the collision event and the gradient, and then that is going to call set particle data and pass that data through. Now, the other function that we're going to call is going to be our display particles function. So we are going to declare that, and let me just scroll down so we can see it, and let's call that from up here. And so in display particles, this is relatively simple, but basically what we're going to do is we're going to read over our array of particle decal data and turn those into an array of particles. So the first thing that we're going to need is an array of particle system.particles. I'm going to call this this needs to be an array. Call this particles. And in display particles, we are going, we need to initialize the array. Equals new particle system.particle array of max decals. And we are going to, in display particles, we're going to use a for loop to fill it with our data. So we're going to say for particles, let's use particle decal data dot length, really, or yeah, dot length. They're going to be the same, but anyway. Oh, particle data, not decal data. Particle data dot length. And we are going to set all of the values. So the first one is going to be particles I dot position equals particle data I dot position. And then I'm just going to copy this because it's going to be largely the same. It's going to be dot rotation 3D of the particle is going to be equal to rotation from the data class, start size of the particle is going to be equal to size of the data class, and start color of the particle array is going to be equal to color of the data class. So now we've copied the data that we created from our data class into our array of particles, and we're ready to actually display them. Now, in order to display them, we need a particle system to do that. So we're going to add a private particle system called decal particle system. And this is going to be equal to get component particle system. Because this is attached to the same game object, we can do this, right? And then we are going to call down in display particles decal particle system dot set particles. And we're going to pass in our array particles and an int for the size, which is going to be particles Probably not the best variable name. Dot length. Okay, now all that remains to be done is to actually call this from our launcher. So let's save this script, return to particle launcher, and in onParticleCollision, we are going to call our function. So we're going to need a reference to that particle decal pool. We're going to add a public particle decal pool called Splat decal pool. And we are going to call Splat decal pool.particleHit and pass in our collision events I and our particle color gradient, right? So the particle color gradient is set in the inspector, and the collision event, we're going to go through our list of collision events, and for each one of them, we are going to call splat decal pool.particleHit, pass in the particle collision event with all the data in it and the gradient that we want to pick a color from, and we should be good. Okay, so now let's save the particle launcher script and return to the Unity editor, and now we just need to wire up the public variables. Let's select the particle launcher, and we have our splat decal pool variable. We're just going to drag in the particle system that we created, and we should be good to test. Woo! So now you can see that since we only initialized it to 100, we get this kind of snake, right? Where the particles are expiring and they're being replaced by new ones. So I just wanted to show you this so that you could see that, if you set it to a low number, this is the effect that you get. And there's a lot of games that do it this way, more or less. But if you want to kind of go for the effect that we had in the earlier demo, you just need to raise the max decals of the particle decal pool, right? And this would be something that you might want to play with regard to performance, depending on your game and so on. You want to also make sure that your max decals is not greater than the max particles in the system, right? Because you could run out of particles. And you could actually add something to the script, right, to just set that via script. But in this case, we just set it manually. And now we can paint the world in pretty rainbow colors. So yeah, that's the basics. I have one little bonus feature, which is the droplets, which I'll show you guys in a second. But let me just take a couple questions before I do that and see how everybody's doing. ALA Slipknots asks, guys, does the splash curve itself based on the surface it hits? No. If you shoot, these are just quads that stick to things. So if you shoot the edge, you can see they're sticking up over the edge. I'm sure there is some way to do that. My solution would just be to make them small and try to avoid situations where that could happen. You could... I don't know how to do it in a computationally cheap way. I think at that point you would need not a decal, but a shader. You would need to actually be doing sort of like vertex painting type stuff, modifying the color. It's getting past the point where I know what to tell you. Certainly it's possible with some kind of a shader, but I don't know how to do it. Oscar Russo asks, do the splats have a lifetime? They do not. They're only replaced when you overwrite the oldest one. So once you've spawned 1,000, it's going to start expiring the oldest one and replacing it with the new one.